the time.
Forever? Tangent. Hold.
Halt.
Hashtag always MGM.
You are approaching the unloading area.
Calm down. AK haters.
But what if it could?
Behold, the majesty of the Sistine ceiling.
For the kids.
A salute to all theme parks, but mostly Walt Disney World.
Ha! What a cute ending.
Aloha, and
Don't Dillo it.
This is Theme Park Thursday with Dillo's Diz. She is Jen.
Hello.
And I am Frank, and we are here to potentially resolve a 10-year debate this year, 7 years of this podcast, but 10 years of Jen and I's feelings about Inside Out. And we have a guest. We're excited for the guest because we're going to do a lot of deep diving, I think, into the world of Inside Out and perhaps our own feelings and emotions.
See how it all goes.
But I am going to turn it over to Jen first because she did the discovery here.
Yeah. So scrolling through LinkedIn one day, like you do when you scroll through all the apps, if you've listened to the podcast, you know my love for Bing Bong. I love Bing Bong with all of my heart. Nothing has made me cry more in a Pixar movie than Take Her to the Moon for me. I can't even talk about it without getting emotional. I see our guest trying not to cry as well.
You holding it?
The unconditional love Bing Bong has for Riley, where he sacrifices. Anyway, so obviously, while scrolling through LinkedIn, when I see a picture of Bing Bong, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop because what is this on my feed? And I think this person and I must have had a mutual connection, which is why he came up. You know, I'm still trying to understand LinkedIn all these years later. But he talked about Bing Bong and sadness and how sadness basically just let Bing Bong be sad when he needed to be sad. And, you know, that processing of emotions. And I commented, and then I was like, you know what? I think we need to talk to you more. And I think we need to do a whole deep dive on Pixar and how they get you and just how the movies at this point are really helping kid understand their emotions and identify and process and all the things. So he was nice enough to agree to come talk to us. So I'm very excited.
100%. And especially, again, now that this is going to be the 10-year anniversary of Inside Out, but last year, Inside Out 2 dominated the box office for months. And then in December, the Disney Plus series Dream Productions, I call it Dream On because of the that's a malaprop for that's a HBO series that's totally inappropriate from the early 90s. But the Dream Productions, which was an offshoot of Riley's own dreams, debuted in December. So we thought it was an appropriate time across the board to bring in our guest and to say that he is the founder of the Neurodiversity Collective. Like I probably can talk for a long time about that as because you know, a self-started dream is something, you know, we all think about sometimes. And he's got his own podcast that he can talk to and a book. So we'll get into all of that. And here he is at long last, because I like to do my long introduction. It's Dr. Matt Zakreski. Dr. Matt, hello.
Yay.
Oh, you guys just, I mean, like, this is just great energy. like delightfully chaotic. I'm like, all right, these are my people. Good.
Oh, good.
We have, you know, like interruptions and sidebars and, you know, offshoots to the offshoots. It's like, oh yeah, we may get nothing done, but we're going to have a fun conversation.
You have figured us out in the 2 seconds. That is exactly this entire 7 years of the podcast.
Well, that's going to do it for here on Theme Park Thursday. But Delightfully Chaotic is definitely going on the website. I think.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I love that. That sounds that's a great way to put it.
Well, welcome. Dr. Matt, before maybe we get into all the Pixar and Inside Out conversation, maybe just give me an overview of the Neurodiversity Collective, because I'm super fascinated.
Yeah. So I'm a clinical psychologist, and I grew up as a gifted kid in New Jersey, in Central Jersey, in the 90s. And like a lot of gifted kids, I started school came very easy to me, and like that was fine. But no one ever explained to me that the social part of being gifted is tricky. And so I sort of got my butt kicked by that, and then got to high school, found my people. And then the academics got harder than I was smart, and I realized I never learned how to study, because you never have to learn a thing you never have to do. And then they were like, "Oh my gosh, you're so smart. Nobody noticed you had ADHD." I'm like, "Well, that explains a lot." So I said, I was like, if I ever work with kids, I want to work with kids like me. Fast forward many years later, now I am a clinical psychologist, and I've worked with so many of these kids in different spaces that over time, those kids, their parents wanted me to talk to their teachers wanted me to talk to the schools wanted me to talk to the communities. And now I'm also a professional speaker. So I travel all over the country, talking to organizations and conferences about how to support neurodivergent kiddos. So, I mean, like all good research, it's me search. So here I am doing, just helping kids like me have an easier life.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think obviously I love the, almost like the pay it forward aspect of it. In the greatest sense, I guess I'm curious. Jen has an 8-year-old. I can remember she's 8 now, and a 10-year-old, and I have an almost 9-year-old. What do you find yourself connecting to the most, maybe in this age range at this point?
I guess like 8 to 10 is such a great range, because they've sort of thrown off the shackles of like young kidness, and now they're like, okay, I'm pretty much a functional small human right now. Like, I can get myself a juice. I can make myself a sandwich. I can I'm going to choose my own clothes in the morning. Like, my oldest is 6, and where she's just starting to edge out of that right now. But it's, I mean, I always joke that my best age range is 8 to 28. Like, those are the people I do best with. But, I mean, that's such a great age, because they can really start to give back in therapy. Like, it's not just, I'm telling you what to do. It's like, well, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I'm feeling. It's much more collaborative. It's bidirectional. And honestly, this is the age where you start to see some of the growing pains that come with increased independence, right? I want to go to sleepovers. I want to join the travel soccer team. Like, Girl Scouts isn't as easy as it was when we would sit in a circle and like, make little stick figures out of popsicle sticks. Like, now we're actually have to do things. And like, so giving kids the tools to navigate a world that gets increasingly complex, that's where somebody like me could come in.
Yeah. I love you saying tools. So my son is 10, and he got a sensory processing disorder diagnosis when he was in kindergarten. We're exploring other neurodiversities as well. Same for my daughter. They both have a ton of anxiety. We are pro therapy in this house, and I will always refer to like the toolbox, and just putting things in your toolbox that you can pull from at different times whenever you need it to help you in different situations as it goes on. But I love that neurodiversity is something that's being talked about more, and there's more awareness. And once parents are seeing more traits in their kids, they're kind of going on their own journey with it. And it's all a very cool thing to see. That it's more normalized, I guess, than what we saw in the 90s or the 80s or.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and that I think takes me, we can merge a little bit into the inside out conversation, because I think something else that comes up too is how our children in our age ranges are expressing emotions or how they're feeling. And my kid is kind of an open book. Like, she is not afraid to talk about what's happened, how she felt about it, how she helped her friends through things. She is very much an open dialogue is her thing, which of course terrifies me in the what if this goes away. So there is that, right? And that was kind of like the impetus for Inside Out, the first movie, which was Pete Docter saw that his child was becoming more reserved after being very open. So I'm like, I don't want it to be this way. So I think, to I guess to the point of Inside Out and how children can communicate their emotions. I don't want to go too far into Jen and I, but I have learned over the last 2 years, our parents were the boomer generation. So I'm Gen X. Jen is on the millennial cusp.
Elder millennial.
Yeah. So, what I've learned the last 2 years is how, our parents had a certain experience, so they tried to improve the situation for us. And then us in turn are trying to improve the situation for children. And the thing I come back to a lot is how I think our mother used TV and film to help teach us those lessons and guide us through those lessons. And so when I look at something like Inside Out now, thinking about how much of a tool this is, again, to go to the toolbox in help guiding children and seeing that things are like this. That's a long way of saying, Dr. Matt, how do you see a film like Inside Out guiding children, and what's the appropriate way to help guide them, if for those who might not know?
So the beauty of something like Inside Out is that it's a piece of media that sort of fills the gap between parents on one side and kids on the other, right? These two groups who have real reasons not to talk to each other or not to get real with each other. And something like Inside Out is it's a middle ground, right? It's a place to meet, and you can consume the media in lots of different ways. Inside Out is funny because it has some fart jokes. It's funny because it's got some really insightful things. It's beautiful. It's absolutely tearjerker. I mean, when I took my kids to see Inside Out 2, and that piano riff starts being like, my wife and I looked at each other, we were like sleeper agents. I'm gonna cry again. Here it is. Like nope, right there it is. So, but the idea, what a lot of parents tell me is like, how the hell do I start this conversation? Like, how do I get my kid to talk to me about feelings? And the beauty about talking to your kids about feelings is that it's not actually about talking to your kids about feelings. It's about talking to your kids, and the feelings come along, right? You don't so I grew up in Jersey, Jersey born and raised, went to college in North Carolina. And up here in Jersey, right? You still say, "How you doing?" It's a greeting. Like, hey, how you doing? And you're like, "Oh, how you doing?" Like, it's a greeting. It's not a question. And then go to North Carolina, I'm like, "Oh, how you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm fine, thank you. My wife's great. She made some pecan." I'm like, "What are you doing? Why are you using these words?" Right? Because most people don't communicate that way. But if you can get your kids talking about a movie, or a podcast, or their favorite YouTuber, or their, the Dogman comic book that they just have to have. Like, there are emotions tied to those things, and you're much better off as a parent getting to the kids' emotions using something as a conduit.
Yeah. And I love kind of the journey from the first Inside Out to the second Inside Out, and seeing Riley more in her teens and knowing that's coming for us. But they were they were able to then go deeper and bring some of that out. So we had gone with other friends, and my son is 10, so his friend also 10, and she was staring at the screen the whole time, which also made me cry, because you could see her just like in it and seeing it and connecting with it. And it's amazing to me how good Pixar is at doing that. They tug at our heartstrings and we kind of get it, but to see that in the kids and see them making those connections and understanding, or, the whole anxiety attack scene in that second movie.
Oh.
And oh my God, I mean, just the tornado and that it's such a perfect explanation without explaining it with words and without making kids feel like they're being lectured, or they're just showing you what it feels like, and they're showing Riley using grounding techniques to get through that. And it's just like, to be able to have that now as a tool for parents to point to, remember that scene in Inside Out 2 when Riley's trying to go to sleep, but those dreams were popping up, or those images of, putting up the bad images instead of the good ones, and you got to focus on the good ones. And just having that as our own tool, I think is so cool to have now. I mean, yeah.
There are, as a mental health professional, there's a lot of bad depictions of mental health on TV, especially neurodivergence, right? People are like, oh, you work with gifted kids, like The Big Bang Theory? I'm like, just stop. I actually have no problem. Young Sheldon's great. Young Sheldon really, I think, shows a lot of the authenticity of growing up neurodivergent. But I often say that there are the two best depictions of neurodivergence I've seen on TV. So the panic attack scene from Inside Out 2. I mean, I felt that anyone who's ever had a panic attack felt that in their soul.
Yes.
Just the panic, the super high fast movement that somehow crystallizes into not being able to move at all.
Yeah.
And then depression from BoJack Horseman. I mean, that is just when the black sludge starts taking everything. I was like, that's what depression is. Like that's so those are real, and let's also give shouts to Big Mouth, who also do some really nice stuff with like puberty and the anxiety that comes with that. But like, there's just so much more positive and accessible depictions of mental illness and neurodivergence in media right now. And those are things that you can look at that and say, that's me, right? That's a thing. I didn't know there was a word or a term for this thing. Now, one of the really bad parts of mental illness is that it serves to make you feel alone.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody's like this. Nobody feels this way. Nobody struggles like I do. I am one of one. Nobody's as broken as me. And then you see it shown and you're like, well, hold on. Like, if they could put this in a movie, then I'm not the only person who's ever had a panic attack over tennis tryouts or theater or, fill in the blank here, right? Somebody out there must know how I feel. And the best possible thing we can get to anybody who feels different, anybody who's struggling is community, right? Yeah. Community care is baseline, right? And if you feel like, oh, damn, there's a person out there who also flips their letters or also has to click a light switch 7 times or also, seeing that makes us feel like maybe we're not quite so broken.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen, we have different books around here. We have Poppy and the Overactive Amygdala, and like all these, books or movies. And I have, at this point, my son will sometimes be like, I feel like they're talking about me. Why are they talking about me? And to explain, because you're not the only one who feels these things or going through these things. There's plenty of kids who are feeling the same and going through the same things, and they're trying to bring that to light because it's not just you. And yeah, I think because we what was the term, delightful chaos? What was our term?
Delightfully chaotic.
Delightfully chaotic. Yeah. So to tangent a little bit, I feel like another show that kind of does that well is Bluey, because there's been more conversations about all the Bluey kids and different neurodiversities that they may or may not have. But again, it's when you see it and you go, well, look at this character, like, oh yeah, oh my goodness, and not even for us to notice, but they're bringing it to light, and you're right, making those connections and creating that sense of community.
Speaking of connections, to kind of go back to the original post of how we all became connected
Yes.
with between Bing Bong and sadness, it struck me a little bit to talk about connection through sadness. And so I was like, well, I don't know what that means. It was a check-in for myself on that. So I know what you mean, but perhaps you can explain a little more in depth because my immediate reaction was like, "What's this?" And I was like, "I know what he
Your
means."
face was giving a lot of things, Frank. It was like, oh, that landed. I'm not sure if it landed right, but it did land.
Yeah.
So let's think about it this way, right? If you could think about a time in your life where you were really, really sad, maybe you lost a job, maybe somebody passed away, maybe something catastrophic happened, right? Something really bad happened. Now, in those moments, our brains engage in two competing emotional responses, right? And you could call this fight or flight. So it's like, okay, I need to withdraw. I need to get under my blanket. I need to never leave my room because things are bad and I feel sad. This is in complete contrast and at war with, I also have to act like everything is fine and I have to keep moving on with my life and I have to go to work, put on a shirt today, leave the house, get the kids to school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those things cannot coexist, right? So it creates what we call in psychology ambivalence, right? So why do most people struggle with sadness? It is a feeling that brings up great amounts of ambivalence. I know I need to be sad, but I don't want to be sad.
Yeah.
Oh, look, Frank. Oh,
something's happening.
Down goes Frank. An emotional haymaker from Dr. Matt in the third round, and Frank is on the couch. And I don't mind sharing this. Like, as we record this podcast, my grandmother is in very poor health and was discharged from the hospital to hospice. And honestly, I know what that means, right? And when I took my kids to visit her this summer, and I was fine until we left the nursing home, and then I burst into tears, right? And my kids were like, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." And I'm like, and I cry openly in front of my kids. And I'm like, Daddy's just very sad. And my daughter looks at me, she's like, "Was it a bad visit?" And I'm like, "No, sweetie, it was a very good visit. I don't know if I'm going to see my grandmother again. Like that's hard for me." And a lot of times with kids, you don't know what lands, right? You don't know what plants a seed. We got in a car, we drove back from Boston all the way back to Jersey. And as we're pulling into the house, my daughter says, "Daddy, I'll be sad when you leave." And I'm like, "Yeah, sweetie." And that's an okay thing to be sad about. But it's also true that we had a good visit with Nana today, right? She goes, "Yeah." I'm like, so that's a thing. Both things can be true, right? And I think fundamentally my job as a mental health professional is helping people hold two different thoughts in their head at the same time, right? You could have a great job and then lose it. And that sucks. It is allowed to suck. It is also, it doesn't undo the fact that you worked there for 7 years, you made some money, you had some great professional experiences, you made some friends, right? We can hold space in our brains for multiple things to happen at the same time. And the thing that Inside Out does beautifully is, the overarching metaphor that comes in where like the memories are not just one feeling, they're all the feelings. They're fear and anger and happiness and dread and all those other things. Because, when we look back at our memories, there might be a leading emotion like, oh, this thing makes me happy. But like they show us in Inside Out, part of the reason Riley is able to feel happy is that she was sad at first. We can't really tell the story of one thing without bringing in elements of other things, right? It's our own hero's journey.
Yeah. I love that. Frank, are you all right? Do you want to?
Yeah.
Okay. I think, Joy she represents so much of, I think, how the time we all grew up, which was, you're sad. Well, someone has to make it better.
Yeah.
Maybe also a little bit, you're sad, we'll get over it. Whereas, now we're realizing what you're saying. A lot of things can be true at once. It's okay to have many feelings about the same thing. And I love when they change all the core memories and they kind of all have their hands in it and they see all the emotions that Riley went to in order to be happy again. And, you know, she lost the hockey game, but it's okay because then her parents made her feel better and they went on and whatever it is. And they show that so like beautifully in the movies. Yeah.
I think, you know, just to follow up that, you know, I'm very much a suppressor of emotions, and we don't need to deep dive on me this whole time, but no, we don't.
That's for another time.
And I think
Let me at him. Let me at him.
That's another call with Dr. Mann later on. Yeah.
You know, and when Jen and I saw the movie, I think it spoke to that a little bit. And whether it's our 7.5-year age difference that, you know, we have different experiences and went through even just a slightly different lifestyle in those early years. But I think there is more that says to my Gen X, which is often jokingly described as indifferent, you know, like well, we're just in the middle here. And with Jen, who connected more, and I was like, oh, you're connected because it was a little girl and blah blah blah. You know, back then. Now I understand a little more. I have a daughter. I have, you know, there's obviously the franchise is growing with me more. I understand anxiety a lot more than I did 10 years ago. So Inside Out 2, I thought to me was better than Inside Out 1 because I connected more to Inside Out 2. And so there's this fully formed thing coming out. But I will say that, yeah, it is for me personally that, you know, we were watching ABC's What Would You Do or whatever that show is the other day, where people are showing compassion and helping others who are acting out a situation. And I'm like, why am I holding back tears? Why can't I just let the tears go? I have tears in my eyes. Why can't they go? Yeah. Like this is basically the fundamental reason why I have struggled with Inside Out.
Yeah.
Well, and then you think about it, like, you get into the ideas of like how we're so, like, Frank, you and I were both socialized male, right? And like, you know, and certainly that Gen X, like, feelings. What are feelings, man? I've got this Nirvana album. That's my emotion, right? I saw Land Before Time. Here. Right.
To me, more. That's what we're doing. That's my. We get one of those
as you stare off into the middle distance, right? You know, and it is nobody's fault that we were socialized that way. I mean, it's a reality of a lot of broader cultural stuff, things that have nothing to do with us. You know, I often say to my clients, like, your environment is context, but it's never an excuse, right? And your evolution as a dad and frankly as a person, as traced through Inside Out, is showing us that, like, who we are now is not who we will be in 5 years. And we don't have to be that person, right? We can evolve and change in a lot of different ways, you know. And, you know, I think one of the things that's really, you know, one of the other dads I know really well, he was like, you know, I was okay with Inside Out too, but like, did they have to show all that stuff in the locker room? And I was like, what stuff in the locker room? He's like, well, you know, they were like wearing sports bras and putting on deodorant. I was like, because that's what teenage girls do. Did you think this was some like Penthouse situation where everyone's in frilly underwear? Like, oh, it's a water fight, right? Like, you know, I'm like, listen, life is messy. Inside Out 2 is a messier movie than Inside Out 1 because life gets messier. You know, all my 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds who are like, I can't wait to grow up. I'm like, I want to go like full Billy Madison, like,
yes,
you know, because, and especially if you're neurodivergent and your brain sort of defaults to a more of a black and white thinking model, the complexities and nuances of relationships as you age into that like 13 through 20 age bracket. I'm like, you think your mom is your friend now? It's about to get a lot worse. Like, there's gonna be a lot more shades of gray in there, right? And And I tell parents this not to scare them,
Yeah.
but it's like, listen, if you know a hurricane is coming, you buy your sandbags, you buy a slicker. Like, you don't go like, well, I don't want the hurricane to be coming. No,
Right.
away with you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So like your evolution here, Frank, is in a lot of ways what the movie is meant to pull from us, right? It's not just, oh, I'm doing this well, I'm Riley.
Right.
Riley is an imperfect protagonist, which makes her a good protagonist. And that's what we want people to see themselves in that messiness, in that hero's journey. Because, man, listen, I do this for a living. And I still sometimes ask my wife, sometimes I'll be like, I'm fine. Because I got 40 years of programming that says, man, no feelings. Punch.
Right.
Yeah. I think one of our biggest debates about Inside Out, and I saw you trying to hold back your own tears in the green room while you were there, is the scene where Bing Bong says, take her to the movie. I can't get into it too much. And that, I mean, will always make me cry. It did the first time, and it will, because I see the unconditional love, and that's what does it for me. And that has always been a debate here. Like, I mean, yeah, I guess, I don't know, from Frank. And being like, how do you not cry at that scene?
Yeah.
Can you?
That scene never hits for me, which I feel like it should. It does not. And I don't know why.
Dr. Matt, can you tell me how you feel and see that specific scene?
So for me, that specific scene is, it's about the things we have to lose to become the people we need to be. And, there was a moment recently where, like, I went to go pick my daughter up at an after school thing, and she like waved at me from the playground, like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'll come to you. And like my heart broke a little.
Yeah.
Like, and in that moment, I am Bing Bong. Take her to the moon for me. Because our roles evolve as parents and caregivers and even mental health professionals, right? The weird thing about my job is to make myself irrelevant, right? I need to be the person that, like I always tell my kids, if you're still seeing me in 10 years, something has gone wrong, right? Like, so we have to change ourselves fundamentally, not in our values, right? Not who we are, but in what we do. And for men in particular, a lot of love is expressed through action, right? Like, like that committed action, like what we do for the people we love. And you'll have that moment where I don't need to cut my kid's burger up anymore. I don't need to come get them from a sleepover at 10 o'clock because they had a nightmare. Like, my role is fundamentally shifting. And this is what the research shows us. And in those teen and tween years, parents tend to struggle to connect with the siblings of not their gender. And they overconnect with the children who are their gender, right? Because it feels like less of a minefield. Like, I'm already like, I'm more comfortable with things like periods and underwear than I'd say most men are, just as a function of what I do for a living. But I know when that journey starts for my daughter, that's going to be a hurdle to clear. Whereas right now it's just, I walk into the field, right? And those are things that all of us at some point have to leave parts of those relationships behind.
Yeah.
And there's a grieving process that comes with that. And I think in those moments, when I think about Bing Bong's face, it's not a face of sadness. If you look, he's not crying, he's not bawling. There's a sort of a beautiful, sad smile on his face.
Yeah.
Because that's love, right? To love someone, sometimes it means you take a step way back.
Yeah. Yep. And he knows in that moment what Riley needs.
And it's bigger than him, right? Love is selfless.
Yep. Yeah.
I hear you. Jen and I are very nostalgic. Our whole life.
Shocked.
You would have never thought that about us. I know.
So the ability to let go of things in the past, or things that, whatever it may be, it's not our strong suit. There is an attic at our parents' home with newspapers from the 70s of people who died. That is so. I mean, so is that part of it is because we're is holding on to so many things and not letting go of anything connected to this scene or not. Is that a bigger struggle in emotional? I'm not talking about me at this moment. Is that for anyone generalizing? In order to work towards having all those emotions be in the same place as needed. I don't know.
So I'm gonna sort of pivot to a different pop culture touch point here. Like, carrying things with you, whether they are emotions or memories or objects, right? Carrying them with us for a while makes sense. But at some point, we're carrying luggage that we don't need to carry anymore. And like, if you go to like the Marie Kondo approach, right? It's like, does this spark joy? Right? A stack of newspapers in your attic from the 1970s, I'm telling you, that doesn't spark joy.
What?
That is the definition of emotional obligation. Right? And I challenge my clients all the time, like, find your joy in the thing you have to do. I cannot say you don't have to go to Thanksgiving dinner with your in-laws. Can you find the joy in that? What is the joy? Right? But there is no joy in a stack of newspapers. There is no joy in the shirt you wore to, Camp Aberwocky in 1993 that hasn't fit you since 1994. Right? And so it's like, either can I upcycle this into something that will bring me new joy, like put it in a t-shirt quilt, frame it for all I care, right? But like, the idea is, nostalgia feels like a passive verb. I would argue the best way to keep nostalgia in your life is to make it an active verb, right? How do I honor the things, the memories, the moments, the objects I have in my life as a way of contemporizing that? Like, at one thing when we think about nostalgia, is the nostalgia can show up in relationships too, right? And one of my therapy touchstones is, if you have someone in your life and you've gotten to a point where all you talk about with them is the good times you used to have, that's a friendship, that's emotional obligation, right? Recently I had to have a come to Jesus conversation with one of my best friends from college. I'm like, dude, you need to stop talking about the fact that we used to watch Arrested Development when we were hungover as hell in the late 90s and during the early aughts. Like, it was great in the summer of 2005. 2025 now. Like, other things have happened. There have been several presidential elections. Right? You get a hobby, right? And it's one of those things, like, the good times were great and they're past. We don't have to dismiss them, but we also can't live there, right? And so, as a lot of the language I use for things is finding a third door solution, right? So it's not that, Jen likes Inside Out, Frank hates Inside Out, you guys will forever be the Hatfields and McCoys. The third door solution is, Frank can see what Jen likes about it. And Jen's like, yeah, Frank, I could see the parts of this where it wouldn't land for you. That inherent compromise is the fundamental nature of any relationship, whether it's a podcast or a sibling or a romantic partner or your boss or. So, like, you can compromise as a nostalgic person by refreshing the things that you've carried with you, or by saying, I know how much joy this brought me. Let me give it to a family who needs it more than me. So it's bring them joy. Like Andy at the end of Toy Story 3, right? Now they're just, openly sobbing. Right?
Now, there is a time that I cried. Yeah, that's about 15 minutes worth of crying because he's giving up his toys.
Yeah, and there's and that's a way, like that's a great example of like if you brought his giant box of childhood toys to college, people be like not to be crass, but like, can you imagine trying to get laid in college if there's a giant box of like maybe they're into that. I don't know. I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to
about my time in the 90s.
No judgment.
Space. But like, and I personally don't agree with giving Woody to Bonnie.
Mhm.
I brought my favorite childhood stuffy to college, and he's my son's now. But I also can understand it, right? That's the compromise. That's the inherent thing. It's not we throw this in the garbage, and it's not I have to carry it all with me. And there's one of the best quotes in mental health is, don't stumble over something behind you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And moving on is painful. And honestly, a lot of times orbiting something in the past keeps us tethered to that. And since it's the closest we can get to it, since it's in the past, we keep our faces pressed up against that screen because we know when we turn away, we'll be that much further away from that thing, whether it was getting dumped at the 8th grade social or, the time you propose to your partner or whatever. Like, to turn from that means we are losing the anchor point that gives us in our lives. Right.
Yeah.
And that's why any healing journey is fundamentally about courage. It's about faith, because you have to turn into the unknown and leave the things you know behind you because they are in the past.
Yeah. I mean, and to bring it back to Riley and her journey, especially at the end of that second movie, is, she really thought she was going to be on this path with her 2 best friends, going to this school, being on this team, and she had to go through a lot of stuff and realizing more about herself and trying to get herself out of that panic attack state in order to come to the realization of, wait, what have I been doing? And to be able to move forward at that point. Yeah.
Are there other Disney or Pixar films? I have 2 questions in my head, and I don't want to go too far past an hour to keep your time. But are there other Disney, Pixar, and Pixar films that you can speak to, but maybe we're not thinking of, but because of your connection with neurodiversity, that really jump out at you and say, wow, this is something that maybe generally is not being seen or acknowledged in one way, but you see it for what it is?
I mean, there's a couple, and we can come and do a whole second podcast about neurodiversity.
Yeah.
And but have you seen the short film Float?
Yes.
Oh,
right.
My God.
Yeah. Like,
so good.
Well, and as a dad and as a mental health professional, one of the things I ask parents in one-on-ones is like, when was the last time you screamed at your kid, can't you just be normal? And there's such a great shame around that. But fundamentally, like, you have to parent the kid you have, not the kid you wish you were going to have. But in order to do that, you have to come to grips with the kid you have. And that is not easy. I often tell this story about this, this dad that I work with. He was a very big deal college football player back in the day. Like, he was on the cover of magazines level big. And his kiddo got mom's genes, right? So the kiddo was like 5'10", 5'8", 110 pounds. Like, so like, think very like, I know we're leaving the Disney world. I don't know if that's okay.
Of course.
We're going to pivot to How to Train Your Dragon.
We go wherever we get.
Like, dad is stoic from How to Train Your Dragon, and the kid is Hiccup.
Yeah.
Right? And Hiccup couldn't find his joy until he stopped trying to be stoic, and stoic couldn't connect with Hiccup until he realized that Hiccup was going to be his own way.
Yeah.
Right. And that was this dad's journey. And at one point he's like, am I wrong? He's like, am I a jerk because I want to throw the football around with my kid? I'm like, you're not a jerk for wanting to do that. That's what you did with your dad. I get it. But you have to ask yourself the question, is your kid getting joy from this?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, no. I'm like, then our obligation as parents is to find the things that give our kids joy and go to where those are.
Yeah. Meet them where they are.
Right. Mm-hmm. Because that's where we're going to deepen our relationships. That's where we're going to find that love. Yeah. Right. Because that's like, and other things may grow from those moments, but we have to meet our kids where they are.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking of, to your point, Frank, of like other movies, and I was thinking of like Monsters, Inc., of just, showing that monsters are more scared than we are, of us than we are of them, or how, in Up, they can tell such a story in just that little married life interlude and make all the parents cry while also showing the process of, an older man who they probably wouldn't connect with otherwise, making a connection with a kid in order to process his grief, and Wally, which is just quiet but says so much. And it's really interesting to just see all the hidden messages throughout the movies and how
and the one, because Dr. Matt, you spoke to it earlier, was community, which we talk about all the time. As a podcast, and our joy in doing the podcast is the community that we created. Yeah. But but as I was also thinking of movies, and one that doesn't come up as much, but I really love, but I don't know if it connects in the same way, is Raya and the Last Dragon, right? Because Raya is kind of isolated and slowly builds a community for herself, that then leads to that climax, which again, Jen and I on the last podcast, or maybe it was a Theme Park Thursday Live, we're talking about, will this last 5 years or so of movies, how will it be looked at in 20 years when the young kids grow into adults? Will it be their movies like Wish, like Raya, like anything right now that is being shown as underperforming? But Raya and the Last Dragon especially was that kind of movie where I was like, oh, this is hitting on everything for me, because of how that small group comes together at the climax.
Yeah.
It's really great.
Yeah. Yeah. I forgot where I was going to go. I was going to go somewhere else. Until I left my brain.
But I'll pivot real quick, maybe, just since this podcast is normally called Theme Park Thursday. For years it has been discussed that Inside Out will eventually have a theme park attraction. Yeah. And I think one of why it hasn't happened yet is because of all the things we've been talking about the last hour, and how can that effectively translate to a ride, an experience? Are there things that, again, with neurodiversity in mind, that you could, I'm putting you on the spot here, brainstorm and see as a way that this intellectual property can connect to a wide audience, but especially to those who are neurodivergent, and really create something great?
I mean, that's the fundamental question, right? I mean, I love the theater, and I love amusement parks, and those are two spaces that have traditionally been very anti-neurodivergence, like not intentionally so, but it is hard for neurodivergent people to access those spaces, right? And Disney and Six Flags, they put in sensory rooms, and that's a great start, right? And you can do the fast pass line, and that's a great start. But fundamentally, these things are built in ways that are not neurodivergent affirming, right? So if I was going to create a space, an attraction for Inside Out, I would have it be more of a choose your own adventure thing. Like, if you've got 5 different spaces for the 5 different emotions, right? Like, can you have a bounce house for joy? Can you sit in reflective, contemplative silence in sadness? Can you face your fears for anxiety? Can you compare and contrast, sensory experiences that bring you joy and that give you disgust for disgust? And then talking about healthy ways to express anger. The biggest way anger gets in our way is when we try to hold it back, right? There's a lot of holes and a lot of drywalls for a lot of people who are trying to not be angry, right? The best way to get out in front of your emotions is to be in charge of how you release them, because if you don't take the time to deal with it, it will take the time to deal with you. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that, call it theme park 3.0, right? That like it's more immersive, it's more interactive, it's more choose your own adventure. But I also could see the broader Disney populace getting down with that, because it's like, I need a joy day, I need a disgust day, I need a disgust and anger day.
Yeah.
Like it's Splash Mountain's always Splash Mountain.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. No, I like that idea.
Yeah.
I
That's why I wanted to put it, because you could see where it could go in the traditional theme park attraction sense, but to broaden it and to make it more accessible is really would be the challenge. And I do wonder if the minds behind such things go, well, we should take all these things into consideration, considering what the property is. Jen, before we wrap things up here, is there anything that you want to throw me under the bus for?
We don't have that kind of time. We don't have time. Dr. Matt is very busy. We cannot do deep dives like that. But Dr. Matt, you are very busy. I saw you put all the dates of all your speaking engagements for the spring up, and I was like, that's a lot. That's a lot to do. Can you tell everyone all the things you got going on?
So I have two primary entities, right? There's the therapy version of me. That's the Neurodiversity Collective, right? We do therapy all over the country. We can work in every state but California. And so that's my primary job. That's my 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. I'm also a professional speaker and consultant, so I travel around, which is why I post my travel schedule on LinkedIn. And so I have obviously people's like, if you need me for you, then it's the neurodiversitycollective.com. If you need me for your organization, then it's drmattzakreski.com. Right. So I sort of like
love it. And you have a book and a podcast.
I do. Yes, I'm, trying to be as good at podcasting as you guys are.
in the best chaotic way possible.
So yeah, the podcast is called Nerding Out on Neurodiversity, because that's what we do. And it's, co-hosted by me and my, someone who's an educational coach in our practice. He's also my producer. His name is Jake Noonan. He's awesome. And then my book is the Neurodiversity Playbook. It came out last year, and it's sold more than I could have ever possibly imagined.
Awesome.
So all this travel sort of functions as like a practical book tour. I'm like, look, I have my book wherever I am. And that's available on Amazon and also through my website.
Awesome.
Well, like we figured at the start of all of this, we could have gone on for a very long time today, but hopefully in one way or another we can get together again in the future and discuss more, because this has really been great. And because sometimes, as much as we call ourselves Theme Park Thursday, we do like exploring our feelings and emotions, but I mean, we're nostalgic, we're all these things, so it definitely translate, and for you to come on today and discuss it in depth and in a way that is practical and makes us think is really truly appreciated. And we hope to do it again sometime, but it's still technically January, so Happy New Year.
Yes, I loved being here, so
appreciate it. Well, that'll wrap it up with Dr. Matt here. Until next time, she's Jen and I'm Frank. Bye.
Bye.
The Dillo's Diz podcast is hosted by Frank Cardillo and Jen Cardillo Snyder. Music produced by Matt Harvey. Logos and video production courtesy of Snidillo Studios. Dillo's Diz Resort is our Patreon with tiers starting as low as $1 per month. You can visit dillosdizresort.com to learn more. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, X Twitter, and Facebook at Dillo's Diz. Check us out on YouTube by visiting youtube.com/DillosDiz. Don't forget to like and subscribe while you're there. We also have merch available on TeePublic and Etsy. For all this and more, visit our one-stop shop, dillosdiz.com. Dillo's Diz Podcast 2025.